So, imagine this. It's Christmas Eve. Right. And my family just humiliated me in front of everyone. They handed my gift to my unemployed brother, grinning, while my parents sneered that I was too old for presents. I mean, I froze. I didn't scream, but yeah, the $20,000 surprise I'd been planning, gone. Just like that. And here's the thing. It's not just about money, it's about respect. Stick around, because this story gets even crazier. Also, what's the worst gift you've ever received? Tell me in the comments. I stepped out of the cab, the icy December wind immediately biting at my cheeks, and had to pause just a second to catch my breath. I was exhausted. Red-eye flight, 60-hour work weeks, caffeine barely keeping me upright, and I've been running on hope too. The kind that makes you imagine a family Christmas where maybe, just maybe, they'd notice all the effort. The planning, the $20,000 surprise tucked safely in my bag. But, well, hope doesn't equal reality. The muffled roar of the TV hit me as I approached the door, and I could already hear Mason, sprawled on the sofa, laughing at something on his phone. At 29, he was in between ventures, which, in our family code, meant no responsibility, no travel, no deadlines, just occupying the house like it was his. Meanwhile, I had flown in, worn down, physically drained, carrying not just luggage, but the weight of years of planning. The culmination of overtime, skipped vacations, endless saving, all aimed at one moment, giving my parents a retirement cruise they had never dared to dream of. I gripped the bag tighter, trying to steady myself, telling myself, just get through dinner, hand them the gift, see them smile, maybe. Just for once, they'll look at you the way they look at him. I opened the door and stepped into the warm hallway. "Merry Christmas," I called out, forcing a brightness I didn't feel. The scent of cinnamon and roasted turkey should have been comforting, but instead, it tightened the knot in my stomach. Silence answered me. Dad was sunk into his recliner, beer in hand, eyes glued to the football game. Mom flitted around the coffee table, arranging appetizers with precise care, like even the deviled eggs had to perform. And Mason, occupying 3 cushions on the sofa, still laughing at his phone, the center of attention without effort. I swallowed the lump forming in my throat, trying to hide the sting behind a polite smile. "Oh, you're here," Mom said, still not looking up. "Wipe your feet, Claire. I just had the carpets done." Right, of course. Arriving tired after a cross-country flight, and my first job was to avoid ruining her carpets. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, Dad," I said, my voice faltering slightly. I stepped in to hug Mom, and she pivoted away to adjust a stocking, leaving me grasping at air. "Hey, sis," Mason said, not even looking up. "You bring the good scotch, or did you cheap out again?" I froze, forcing myself to swallow, forcing the polite smile to stay in place. Dad muttered something under his breath about it letting me take my coat off, but my chest felt tight. I moved toward the tree, buried under a mountain of gifts. My contribution. A few physical presents, small and thoughtful, but the real gift the cruise waited in my purse. I tried to calm my breathing, reminding myself that this moment was years in the making. Dinner was announced, but first, the prelude of presents. Mason's impatience was obvious, practically radiating. Mom handed him the first box designer sneakers, then a gaming console, then another. Cash. My polite smile was still plastered on, but my stomach twisted. I was 32, a grown woman, financially independent, capable of buying whatever I wanted, but the disparity was striking. And there I was, playing the good daughter, keeping my composure, while the spotlight once again landed squarely on Mason. Then it was my turn. Mom handed me a small, unwrapped bag, vanilla bean scented candle. "I know you like boring things," she said casually. I thanked her, my words tasting like ashes. And then the moment that broke the thin veneer I'd been holding. One last box, elegantly wrapped in silver with a blue ribbon. My signature style, but I hadn't wrapped it. The tag clearly read to Claire. Aunt Sarah from Paris, the one who really saw me, had sent something special. Something carefully chosen, picked up with thought, with love. My heart skipped. This was the culmination of planning, of hope, of 3 years of careful saving. And then, Mom handed it to Mason. My voice caught, sharp. "Mom, that tag says Claire." The room went silent. Mason's hand was already on it, and Mom just shrugged, as if it was nothing. My gift, meant to honor my parents' years of hard work and dreams, had been casually stolen in front of me. And that was just the beginning. I walked to the downstairs bathroom and locked the door behind me, letting the soft click of the lock echo louder than I expected in the silence. The hallway noise faded, leaving just my own ragged breathing and the persistent hum of the heating system. I leaned against the counter, my hands tightening around the strap of my bag. The envelope burned against my hip, a weight that was more than money. It was every ounce of effort, every skipped vacation, every late night spent calculating and planning, all condensed into a single sheet of cardstock. And yet, in a way, it wasn't just paper. It was my last thread of control in a house where control had always been someone else's game. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, fluorescent lights throwing every dark circle, every shadow into stark relief. My face was pale, eyes heavy, lips pressed thin. I looked tired, exhausted, even. But I also looked like someone who had been pushed too far. He'll appreciate it more. The words my mother had said looped through my mind over and over. Every repetition sharpened something inside me, a kind of quiet steel that had been forming for years, building up under the weight of unspoken expectations and the constant pressure of being the responsible one. I clenched my jaw. No, not this time. I pulled out my phone and unlocked the travel app. There it was, staring back at me. Booking reference 88392G. Presidential suite, balcony, butler service, unlimited excursions. $19,850. Non-refundable. Supposedly, but I had purchased elite travel insurance, ironclad in its protections, allowing me to cancel for any reason up to 24 hours prior. My thumb hovered over the red cancel booking button, hesitation and fury mingling in a swirl of adrenaline. My mind flashed to memories I'd stored, like ammunition. Dad at my college graduation, constantly checking his watch, muttering complaints. Mom at my promotion dinner, talking endlessly about Mason's new DJ career, ignoring the moment that was supposed to celebrate me. "You're too old for presents." The words had landed with a weight I couldn't shake, a casual erasure of all the effort and thought I had put into honoring them. "Okay," I whispered to the empty bathroom. "If I'm too old for presents, then they're too old for this gift on my dime." My thumb pressed the button, and a confirmation box popped up, asking if I was sure. I didn't hesitate. Yes, processing. The screen refreshed, booking cancelled, refund initiated. A strange sensation washed over me. I expected guilt. I had been conditioned to feel guilt my whole life, always the responsible one, the one who took the hits, the one who carried everyone else's mistakes on her shoulders. But instead, there was relief, lighter, freer than I'd felt in years, as if I had dropped a backpack I'd been lugging for 3 decades. But this wasn't just a defensive move. It was the beginning of reclaiming my autonomy. I needed to secure the perimeter to make sure they couldn't bleed me dry anymore. I opened my banking app, my joint account with my parents, supposedly for emergencies, but in reality a financial IV drip for Mason's ventures, glared at me with a balance of $4,200. Every month, I had been depositing $1,500 quietly, helping with groceries, bills, and the occasional car insurance that somehow became Mason's entitlement. I tapped through the screens methodically, transferring the $4,200 to my personal savings. Transfer complete. My chest tightened with a mixture of anger and satisfaction. The joint account was empty. Next, I went to scheduled transfers. Monthly deposit $1,500. Delete. A deep breath. Done. This was my money, my life, and for the first time in years, it felt like it actually belonged to me. I stared at the bathroom counter, at my reflection, and realized I wasn't trembling. I wasn't panicking. My pulse had steadied. I felt a calmness that was almost terrifying in its intensity, a precision born of someone who had finally recognized the scope of manipulation they had endured. I was done being a utility. I was done being the backup generator for Mason's ego, for my parents' perception of what a family should look like. I had withdrawn from their financial control, and with it, a kind of moral leverage that they had always assumed I would relinquish without question. I leaned over the sink and ran my fingers through my hair, letting the faucet run so they couldn't hear my quiet calculation. The cruise. The $20,000 gesture of love and years of planning had been my last thread connecting me to their approval. By canceling it, I wasn't just reclaiming money, I was reclaiming self-respect. Every moment of hesitation, every whisper of guilt was drowned out by a clarity that was almost blinding. They had treated me like I was invisible, like my hard work and care didn't matter. And I had responded not with a fight, not with tears, but with strategy. I was reclaiming control in the only language they understood: consequence. I thought about Mason, sprawled on the sofa, watch on his wrist, smug grin plastered across his face. How little he understood that this game was over. I opened my personal checking account, double-checked balances, logged into the joint account one more time to confirm that nothing was left. I went through the scheduled transfers tab methodically, deleting every automated payment that could be misused. It was surgical, deliberate, and empowering in a way that thrilled me. Each tap of the screen was a quiet declaration: I am not your financial lifeline. I am not the one who will absorb the fallout of your irresponsibility. A wave of relief washed over me, but it was accompanied by simmering anger. The calm after the decision to cancel the cruise was electric, charged. I felt like a dam had broken, releasing years of frustration in a controlled, precise stream. My parents had always expected me to swallow indignities, to take the blame, to financially support Mason's whims. But now, The equation had changed. The cruise was canceled, the accounts emptied, and the scheduled transfers deleted. I had pulled the rug out from under them without a word, without a dramatic confrontation, and yet the impact would be immediate and undeniable. I stared at my reflection again, seeing myself as I rarely did, focused, calm, and unyielding, not hollow, dangerous, almost. This was the woman they had underestimated, the daughter they had assumed would never assert herself. I wasn't thinking about revenge, not exactly. I was thinking about survival, about reclaiming the boundaries that had been eroded over decades. And there it was, the paradox. I had acted quietly, invisibly, and yet the act itself was loud, resonant, and irreversible. I sank onto the bathroom floor for a moment, phone in hand, feeling the weight of the envelope in my bag. The cruise was gone. My $20,000 sacrifice dissolved into empowerment. I ran through the motions in my mind, imagining the reactions, mom checking her email, seeing the cancellation, dad muttering under his breath, disbelief mixing with rage, Mason probably staring at the empty bank account, a sense of shock he had never experienced before, and all of it, just a few taps on a screen, a few decisive moments where I said, no more, enough. I thought about the principle behind it, the core reason I hadn't just let Mason keep the cruise in my stead. Respect. I had been manipulated, diminished, and erased. This wasn't about the cruise. It was about standing up, about saying, I am not expendable, I am not invisible, and I refuse to finance my own erasure. The relief was tempered with a kind of reverent awe at the clarity that had come over me. It was more than anger. It was justice in real time, executed quietly, flawlessly. As I sat there, letting the adrenaline ebb slightly, I felt the calm satisfaction of preparation, of foresight. I had ensured that Mason and my parents could not drain me financially without my consent. The system was reset. My finances, my control, my autonomy were intact. And yes, it was satisfying, almost sweet, to know that they would soon discover it without me needing to raise my voice, without me needing to defend myself yet. The silent impact was far more powerful than any confrontation could have been. Finally, I stood, shaking off the last tremor of fatigue and walking back toward the hallway, phone still clutched, purse securely by my side. Everything felt different. The weight had shifted. I had taken back what was mine, and it was not just a number on a screen, it was freedom. The cruise cancellation wasn't just a financial maneuver, it was a reclamation of dignity, a protest against decades of being taken for granted. Every step I took, back into the living room, every breath I drew, was measured and deliberate. I had made a decision that they couldn't argue with, a move that set the tone for what was to come, and that envelope, once heavy with hope and expectation, now felt like a symbol of my agency, a reminder that I could choose when to give, when to take, and when to reclaim. For the first time, I realized how deeply they had underestimated me. I had been quiet, compliant, obedient for decades, and now, with a few taps, I had flipped the script. My mind, usually so focused on deadlines and analytics, felt free, clear, almost giddy with the possibilities of asserting myself. The cruise was gone, yes, but in its place was something far more valuable: control, clarity, and the first taste of true empowerment against the family that had long thought me predictable and pliable. After I finished securing my accounts and canceling the cruise, a sinking thought hit me. What if Mason had been gaming the system all along? I sat back, phone in hand, staring at my personal banking app like it might tell me some truth I hadn't considered. I knew I had the joint account credentials, set up years ago for emergencies, which they had practically used as a slush fund for Mason's ventures. Normally, I would have hesitated, knowing it was technically a breach of privacy. But not now. Not tonight. I needed to see the battlefield. Slowly, methodically, I logged into the joint account, scrolling through transaction history. The usual deposits and withdrawals were there, my monthly $1,500 contributions, flowing quietly into their hands. But then I noticed subtle patterns, anomalies that didn't make sense. Venmo transfers, small at first, then larger, off pattern, all labeled vaguely, Big T Invest. I frowned, tapping the screen to expand details. Who the hell is Big T Invest? I checked online. Nothing concrete. Instagram, private profile picture of a stack of poker chips. My stomach dropped. This wasn't business. This was gambling. I leaned back, trying to process. The credit card maxed out. Cash advances taken with interest rates that made my head spin. $5,000 gone in a matter of days. And now they were asking me for another $10,000 under the guise of servers. Startup capital, some supposed crypto setup. I pinched the bridge of my nose, a bitter laugh escaping. Really, they thought I would just hand it over again. My mind, racing, pieced it together step by step. This wasn't just mismanagement. This was active deception, manipulation, exploitation. I could feel my pulse quicken, but I kept my hands steady. I had to. Strategy required control. I opened a new tab, logging into the credit monitoring service I had set up for myself years ago. The alerts were dry, clinical, but I saw it immediately, a hard inquiry from Quick Cash Auto Loans. 3 weeks ago, in my name. I hadn't applied for a car loan, not even a new car. And yet, there it was. My throat went dry. Someone had tried to leverage my creditworthiness to cover Mason's gambling losses. I felt the cold prickle of sweat along my neck. But underneath it all, a fierce clarity emerged. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was fraud, actual, deliberate, financial sabotage. I leaned forward, muttering under my breath, testing the theory aloud as if speaking might help solidify the steps. Mason. You little idiot. I began mapping it out in my head. The joint account draining, the suspicious Venmo transfers, the credit card maxed and cashed out, the fraudulent inquiry in my name. It all fit. The servers. Just a cover story, a distraction. The check my parents were pushing for money to cover gambling debts. And here I was, being gaslit, manipulated, positioned as the family villain for wanting to protect my own money. I let out a slow breath, realizing that anger and strategy were merging into something potent. Methodically, I retraced every transaction, noting patterns. The first 2 weeks of December were normal groceries, utilities, minor household expenses. Then, sudden spikes. $2,000 Venmo, $1,500 Venmo, overdraft fees accumulating. Someone was bleeding the account fast, and the speed and pattern confirmed it was intentional, not accidental. I leaned closer, scrolling further, cash advances, credit deposits, tiny miscellaneous charges, all rapidly adding up. My mind raced if I didn't act now. There would be nothing left for me to protect, and I wasn't about to let that happen. I kept talking quietly to myself, almost to pace my thoughts. Okay, let's see. Big T Invest, not a real company, not registered, nothing. Instagram private, yeah, that's clever. Using anonymity to mask the transaction flow. The more I dug, the more it became obvious this was an elaborate system to funnel money into a personal gamble, shielded by my own parents' perception and my brother's audacity. I felt a mix of disbelief and strategic exhilaration. Disbelief at the audacity, exhilaration at finally seeing it clearly. Then came the deeper revelation. I opened the credit monitoring alerts and scanned the reports. The quick cash auto loans inquiry wasn't just suspicious, it was malicious. Someone had taken the numbers from a previous check, an old car payment, and attempted to secure credit under my name. My heart skipped. I realized the fraud extended beyond my parents' accounts. It was directly targeting my finances. I felt a cold shiver, but also a mounting sense of empowerment. I knew this pattern, this architecture of manipulation. I knew how to respond. I paused, eyes narrowing. My mind replayed scenes from earlier in the evening. Mason on the sofa, grinning at his phone. Mom casually handing him the watch. Dad quietly nodding along. All of it fit. The watch theft, the casual cruelty, the setup for more financial exploitation. I felt a flash of anger, but I suppressed it. Strategy required control. I needed evidence, documentation, a record of everything before any confrontation. Each screenshot, each alert, each transaction needed to be preserved, methodically. I began to screenshot everything, creating a digital trail. Venmo transfers, account statements, credit inquiry alerts. Every piece of evidence was a thread in the tapestry that proved deception, fraud, and exploitation. As I worked, a sense of grim satisfaction settled in. This was no longer just about hurt feelings or family injustice. This was about self-protection, about setting boundaries where they had been systematically ignored or violated for decades. Every tap on the screen, every screenshot, every carefully noted detail was a step toward reclaiming control. I could feel the weight of years of expectation and exploitation lifting slightly, replaced by clarity and purpose. I leaned back in the chair, letting my phone rest against my chest. Eyes closed for a moment. The picture that emerged was clear. Damning Mason had gambled away thousands from my parents' accounts. He had attempted to siphon money directly from me through fraudulent credit inquiries and an attempted Venmo transfer. My parents had been, whether knowingly or not, complicit by ignoring patterns and pressuring me to bail him out. I exhaled, a long, slow release, feeling both fury and a strange exhilaration. I had the power now, the evidence, the leverage. I could confront them on my terms. I whispered to myself, pacing the small bathroom. This is bigger than the cruise. This is bigger than Mason's smug grin. This is active fraud, identity theft, exploitation, and I'm not just going to sit back and let it happen. I opened my laptop and began organizing the evidence, systematically folders labeled, screenshots stacked, transactions highlighted, credit inquiry alerts saved as PDFs. Each piece meticulously cataloged. I imagined the confrontation, the strategic advantage of knowing everything, having proof before I said a word. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, protection, boundaries. The adrenaline was settling into a steady, purposeful rhythm now. My mind, usually scattered with work deadlines and client meetings, felt laser focused. Every detail had a place, every transaction a story. I could see the full architecture of Mason's deception, the casual enabler behavior of my parents, and how it all interconnected. I leaned back, momentarily allowing a small, incredulous laugh. Really, after all these years, they thought they could manipulate, use, and erase me. They underestimated me completely. And now, the evidence was in my hands, tangible, undeniable. I whispered aloud, almost to break the tension, almost to remind myself that I was still human. They thought this was family drama. This isn't family drama anymore. This is active sabotage, identity theft, fraud, and I'm ready. My pulse was steady, my hands no longer trembling. I knew the steps I needed to take next. Lawyers, reports, freezes on accounts, precautions, not just for money, but for my security, my autonomy. I felt the blend of relief and anticipation, the relief of clarity, the anticipation of confrontation armed with undeniable proof. For hours, I combed through everything: patterns, anomalies, cross-references between Venmo, credit cards, bank statements, suspicious transfers. The meticulous, almost obsessive work paid off. Every piece of the puzzle fit into a narrative I could now prove. Mason's attempts to manipulate my parents, the casual co-opting of their wealth, and his attempt to siphon from me directly, all laid bare. I felt the weight of realization settle in. I wasn't just fighting for money. I was fighting for recognition, for boundaries, for the right not to be exploited by my own family. And then I paused, eyes widening at the final piece falling into place. The attempted Venmo transfer from my primary checking account, a direct attack, a clear escalation beyond casual exploitation. Someone had my account numbers, routing information, and had tried to link it to a new profile. My heart thudded in my chest. This was personal now. It was aggressive. It was criminal. And the realization was both terrifying and clarifying. There would be no more hand-holding, no more silent compliance. This was a battlefield, and I had just gathered the intelligence necessary to act decisively. I sat back, exhaling, letting the tension ebb slightly. Surprise, frustration, anger, empowerment, they all coexisted, an intense cocktail fueling my strategic clarity. I whispered to the empty bathroom, "You're done. No more. This is mine, and it's over." The cruise, the accounts, the transfers, they were all in my control now, a shield against further manipulation. And I finally felt the strange, intoxicating sense of relief that came from reclaiming authority over my own life and finances. New Year's Eve was bitterly cold, the kind of night that makes every breath sharp and visible, frosting in the air. I parked a little ways from my parents' house, the street lined with cars, lights glowing warmly, but that warmth did nothing to ease the knot in my stomach. This wasn't just a family dinner, it was a battlefield, a carefully orchestrated trap, passive-aggressive in its perfection. Mom had CC'd the extended family, invited aunts, uncles, cousins, friends who didn't know the truth. They'd be there to witness my supposed obstinance, to pressure me into compliance. And I knew it. I could feel it in my bones. I stepped out of the car, scarf wrapped tightly, gloves on, and drew in a sharp breath. Aunt Sarah was waiting for me on the sidewalk, her scarf chic, her coat immaculate, a croissant in one hand. She didn't just accompany me, she was my shield, If you don't go, she said, taking a deliberate bite, they will tell their version. You'll be the villain. I nodded, biting back a sigh. I didn't want a scene. I just wanted it over. Sarah's eyes flashed, steel beneath that calm exterior. Go take the evidence. Take me. We have a watch to retrieve. Inside, the house was buzzing with guests, the smell of food and decorations masking the tension. I walked in, arm in arm with Sarah, and the room fell silent. Mom's mouth opened, then froze. Dad's eyes narrowed as they landed on me. Claire. Mom cried, a smile plastered that didn't reach her eyes. You made it. The glitter of her sequined dress caught the light, but it couldn't hide the panic that flickered in her expression. Mason, holding a beer, looked smug, wearing a suit that was just a little too tight, the Padre Philippe glinting on his wrist. Hey, sis, Mason called out loud enough for everyone to hear. Glad you made it. No hard feelings. Right New Year. Clean slate. He thought he was clever, counting on the audience to reinforce his narrative. He assumed I wouldn't dare bring up fraud in front of Uncle Bob, Cousin Jenny, or anyone else. I let the silence linger a beat too long, then whispered to Sarah, "We'll see." Dinner began, but it was torture. Mom made a toast, subtle but pointed, about sticking together through hard times, casting careful glances my way. Dad told a story about people losing their way, eyes drifting occasionally in my direction. I ate silently, each bite a countdown to the moment of truth. And then dessert arrived. The clink of my fork on the china, a small, deliberate punctuator of time. Uncle Bob, oblivious to the tension, leaned forward. So Claire, Gary tells us you've been working too hard, stressed out. That's why you canceled their big trip. I set my fork down slowly. The clink sounded loud in the silence that followed. Is that what they told you? I asked. Voice calm, steady. Mom's eyes widened, quick warning glances flitting across the room. We're just worried about you. Sweetie, she said quickly, but there was a hint of panic creeping in. I reached into my bag, pulling out a thick manila folder. It felt heavier than it was, loaded with months of meticulous evidence. I placed it on the table in front of me. Is it paranoia when I have the IP logs? I asked quietly. Dad's voice dropped, low. Warning. Claire, put that away. Not here. But Sarah cut him off, authoritative and unwavering. No. Gary, let her speak. I opened the folder, flipping it carefully so everyone could see, but in a way that gave me control. Bank statements, highlighted lines showing every Venmo transfer to Big T Invest, credit card statements with cash advances marked, overdraft fees, fraudulent credit inquiry from Quick Cash Auto Loans, and finally, the police report number confirming identity theft and attempted fraud. Each piece laid out methodically, incontrovertibly. The room went deadly silent. The only sound was the rustle of paper as hands shifted and eyes darted between documents. Mason stammered, standing up, chair clattering to the floor. That's doctored, he said, trying to regain composure. His usual smug grin was gone, replaced with panic. She's lying. She's making this up. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I simply said, voice steady and cold. I didn't fake the police report. Mason, Detective Miller, no relation, is handling this. He traced the IP address. It came from this house, from your laptop. The statement landed like a hammer. Dad's eyes flicked from me to Mason, realization dawning, And suddenly the narrative that Mason had controlled for so long began to crumble. Mom gasped audibly. The performance she had maintained for decades was cracking. Her hands flew to her mouth, but it didn't stop the truth from sinking in. Mason's face paled. For the first time, he looked small, vulnerable, truly cornered. He was the golden child no more, the shielded dreamer exposed for the deceitful manipulator he had become. And there, standing across from him, I felt the quiet thrill of strategic triumph. I had methodically collected proof, and now it was undeniable. Aunt Sarah rose, walking deliberately to Mason, her presence commanding. She was smaller than him by a foot, but she loomed like a giant. "Give me the watch," she said, calm but firm. Mason's eyes darted to Mom, hoping for backup. There was none. Mom slumped, face wet with tears, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Sarah's hands were steady, her voice unwavering. "It's mine, Mason." Mom gave it to me. It was never hers to give. This belonged to my husband, a man who worked for everything he had. "You are a thief and a coward. Take it off, or I will call the police myself and add possession of stolen goods to your list of charges." Mason's hands shook, and for a moment I thought he might argue, but he slowly unbuckled the watch, slamming it onto the table with a scream. "Fine. Take it. Take everything you all want me to fail anyway." His anger was loud, unrestrained, but hollow now. He had nothing left. I stayed seated, calm, a quiet contrast to the chaos around me. "No one wanted you to fail, Mason," I said, voice steady. "We just wanted you to grow up, but it's too late for that now." I stood, carefully, deliberately, scanning the room. Extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, looking on with a mixture of pity and disgust. The perfect family facade that Mom had cultivated for decades lay in fragments among the cake crumbs and wine glasses. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't apologizing. I was calmly asserting reality. "I'm leaving," I said firmly. Mom's voice cracked in panic. "Happy New Year, Claire." She tried, but it lacked conviction. Dad stepped forward, broken and suddenly vulnerable. We can work this out. Don't leave like this." "There's nothing to work out, Dad," I replied evenly. "You made your choice on Christmas Eve. You chose the thief. Now you have to live with him." I picked up the watch from the table and handed it to Sarah. We turned, walking toward the door. The silence followed us like a shadow, heavy and unyielding. Mason didn't chase us, didn't protest further. He was spent, humiliated, and fully exposed. My parents were frozen, their authority and illusions shattered. The fallout had begun, immediate and absolute. Outside, the cold night air bit at my cheeks, a sharp contrast to the heated tension inside. I could hear faint voices behind the closed door, arguments and wails, but they didn't reach me. We walked to the car, Sarah beside me, watch secured. The ride back was quiet, the kind of quiet that's heavy with satisfaction, with the knowledge that justice had been served without a single outburst on my part. It was precise, surgical, it was controlled. In the days that followed, the consequences unfolded rapidly. Mason was arrested 3 days later. He hadn't just tried to defraud me. There were other accounts, other creditors, other credit cards in Dad's name maxed out. A loan shark began demanding repayment, aggressive and threatening. The mountain of evidence I had assembled forced him into a plea deal. 5 years, probation, mandatory counseling for gambling and addiction, restitution, none of which he could pay. He was left with the consequences of his actions. My parents, meanwhile, had to deal with the financial fallout themselves. Forced to sell the house they had planned to retire in, they downsized to a 2-bedroom rental in a less desirable part of town. And I didn't help. I didn't fund them. I didn't buffer their losses. I had set the boundaries and ensured the lessons were learned without my intervention. For the first time, my actions were purely about self-preservation and justice. About 3 months later, I met Dad for coffee. It was the first time I had seen him since the party. He looked thinner, frailer, his bravado gone. "Your mother misses you," he said quietly, stirring his coffee. I allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile. "She misses the ATM. Dad," I replied gently. "She misses the security I provided." "That's not fair," he said softly, though his tone lacked conviction. "We messed up. Claire, we know that. Mason has problems. We were blind." "You weren't blind," I corrected him. You were willing to sacrifice me to save him. That's what I can't forgive." He sighed, gazing out the window. Even now he asked hesitantly. "No," I said, placing a hand on his, not in affection, but in a gesture of finality. "I am not your retirement plan anymore. You have your pension, you have Social Security, you have each other. Figure it out." I stood, gathered my belongings. "I have to go." "Where are you going?" he asked. One last plea. "Paris." I smiled. Sarah and I were going on a river cruise, a real one, not a gift, not a lesson, a choice, a reward for reclaiming control and autonomy. I left him there with his coffee and the consequences of his choices. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of expectation lifted, replaced with clarity, strength, and the sweet, quiet satisfaction of justice done. In the aftermath of that night, the consequences unfolded like a carefully orchestrated domino effect. Mason, who had long thrived on manipulation and easy access to my parents' funds, was suddenly exposed for what he truly was. Arrested just 3 days after the New Year's Eve confrontation, he faced the legal system squarely. His schemes hadn't just involved our family, they had reached beyond, maxing out other credit cards in Dad's name and drawing the attention of a few creditors who were less patient than I had ever been. I remember sitting back that morning, scrolling through the police updates, my chest tight but oddly calm. It was surreal, watching the very person who had tried to exploit me now being held accountable. The plea deal Mason accepted was strict, a combination of mandatory counseling, gambling rehabilitation, probation, and restitution. But the restitution, of course, was a formality. He had no real assets. He couldn't pay back what he had taken or gambled away. I felt a cold satisfaction knowing that, for once, he couldn't manipulate or charm his way out. I could almost hear the echo of his smug laughter from months ago, now replaced with silence and the reality of consequences. There was a subtle, almost grim amusement in knowing that the golden child had finally been unmasked, and he had no safety net left to cushion his fall. My parents, meanwhile, were forced to confront the financial reality of the mess they had indirectly enabled. The house they had cherished, the one they had planned to retire in, became a liability they could no longer maintain. Selling it and downsizing to a modest 2-bedroom rental in a less desirable part of town was a humbling outcome. I didn't participate in moving boxes or sorting through old furniture. In the past, I might have stepped in to mediate or cover losses, but not now. Not this time. This time, I was removed from the equation, a silent observer as they faced the repercussions of choices they had made and the blind loyalty they had shown to Mason. I can't say I didn't feel some strange mixture of guilt and relief, but mostly, it was clarity. I had done my part, and now the rest was theirs to navigate. Reflecting on those days, I can see how each action I took, each decision to assert boundaries, shifted the entire dynamic. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishment, even though the outcomes felt satisfying. It was about reclaiming my autonomy, establishing limits that had never existed, and finally refusing to be used as a financial or emotional safety net. I realized that for decades, I had been conditioned to absorb the fallout from Mason's choices, to sacrifice my own comfort and resources for the illusion of family cohesion. But the moment I canceled the cruise, froze the accounts, and confronted the fraud, the rules changed. I reclaimed ownership of my time, my money, and my peace of mind. The freedom was intoxicating. I can still recall that morning after the confrontation, waking up without the usual weight of obligation pressing on my chest. There were no quiet expectations looming over me, no subtle manipulations, no threats of emotional or financial coercion. I could breathe in a way I hadn't been able to for years. I sat at my desk, sipping coffee, letting the quiet hum of my apartment fill the space around me. For once, the decisions were mine and mine alone. I made a mental inventory of everything I had reclaimed: my finances, my personal boundaries, my sense of agency. It was empowering, a steady, growing pulse of confidence that I hadn't realized I had suppressed for so long. And with that newfound clarity came the ability to plan something entirely for myself, something joyful and unencumbered. Aunt Sarah, who had been my ally and protector throughout the ordeal, had flown in from Paris during the New Year's Eve events, bypassing the family entirely to stay with me. Her presence had been a quiet reassurance, a reminder that I wasn't alone, that someone who truly understood my worth stood with me. Now, in the calm after the storm, we began planning a real trip to Paris. Not a gift or a gesture, but a personal adventure for us. I smiled thinking of walking the streets of the city she had called home for years, sharing moments of laughter and quiet observation with her, liberated from the drama and manipulation that had defined my family interactions for decades. I remember looking at my bank statements that morning, tracing the transactions one last time for reassurance, and realizing the sheer scale of what I had stopped. Thousands of dollars that would have disappeared into Mason's gambling and schemes were now secure, untouched by their chaos. The joint account had been emptied strategically and monthly transfers deleted. The principles I had fought for, boundaries, respect, and recognition of my autonomy, were intact. There was a satisfying weightlessness in knowing that the money that had once been siphoned from me or expected as a default contribution to Mason's whims was finally mine to manage. My freedom fully restored. I felt a quiet grin tug at the corners of my mouth, almost like an inside joke with myself, a private acknowledgement of a victory no one else could appreciate fully. I also reflected on the family dynamics, the roles we had each unconsciously or consciously assumed. Mason had always been the dreamer, The high-risk, high-reward stock my parents invested in emotionally and financially. I had been the responsible one, the steady, reliable return, always providing, always absorbing fallout. Dad, with his loud opinions and need for control, had taken pride in my career achievements publicly while undermining them privately. Mom, a master manipulator, had orchestrated a reality where Mason's failures were always excusable and my sacrifices a given. The dinner confrontation and its aftermath had laid bare these dynamics, exposing them for what they were: dysfunctional, toxic, and unsustainable. For the first time, I understood the importance of stepping outside the cycle and refusing to participate in the narrative that had kept me trapped. As days turned into weeks, I watched the aftermath ripple through the family. Mason, bound by legal constraints and public exposure, became less audacious, less entitled. The parents, humbled by financial losses and the stark reality of their own choices, began to confront their misjudgments. I saw glimpses of remorse, of recognition that their preferential treatment of Mason at my expense had consequences far beyond what they could control. And yet, I remained steadfast in my decision to maintain distance, to protect my well-being above all else. It was an unusual kind of empowerment, one that felt heavy with responsibility yet liberating in its clarity. Planning the Paris trip became a form of therapy, a way to reclaim joy that had long been obscured by obligation and guilt. Aunt Sarah and I mapped out the river cruise, choosing experiences that celebrated culture, history, and freedom. I imagined us sipping coffee along the Seine, wandering through markets, and laughing over mistakes in pronunciation. It was a concrete manifestation of autonomy, a tangible reward for years of patience, resilience, and careful strategy. Each day I spent organizing the trip reinforced the sense that life could be structured around my desires, not dictated by manipulation or past family hierarchies. Sitting in my apartment one evening, I allowed myself a rare, deep reflection. I thought about the long arc of my life up to this point, the sacrifices, the invisible labor, the careful navigation of family politics. It wasn't bitterness that filled me, but a sober recognition of my own strength and capability. I had confronted manipulation, fraud, and disrespect head-on. I had done so with calm, methodical precision, relying on evidence, strategy, and allies rather than reacting impulsively. And through it all, I had maintained my integrity, protecting not just my finances, but my sense of self. It was an empowering realization, one that brought an unexpected sense of closure and satisfaction. Occasionally, my thoughts drifted to small, human reactions, the fleeting moments that reminded me of my own resilience, the satisfaction of seeing Mason's panic, the shock on my parents' faces, the quiet authority of Aunt Sarah retrieving the watch, even the small, almost imperceptible relief that settled over me as the house emptied after confrontation. Those moments were visceral, grounding, reminders that the power dynamics had shifted, that the respect I had long been denied was finally tangible, visible, undeniable. I realized, too, that reclaiming control was a process, not a single event. Each decision, from canceling the cruise to freezing accounts, from collecting evidence to confronting Mason with proof, had been a step toward establishing a framework where I could operate without fear or coercion. It was strategic, deliberate, and careful. but it was also deeply human. I allowed myself small moments of pride, brief smiles at the thought of autonomy regained, and quiet laughter at the absurdity of the situations I had navigated. There was relief in seeing that intelligence, preparation, and steadfastness could dismantle years of manipulation. As the days grew quieter, I began to feel the freedom of space I hadn't experienced in decades. My apartment became a sanctuary, not just physically, but emotionally and psychologically. The silence was no longer oppressive, it was restorative. I could breathe without the background hum of expectation, without the subtle, ever-present guilt trips and financial demands. For the first time in years, I could plan my life around my own needs, my own desires, and the people I chose to trust and include in my circle. It was a profound sense of liberation, the kind that comes only when one has decisively redrawn the boundaries of family influence and personal autonomy. Finally, as the Paris trip approached, the anticipation of adventure and freedom became a symbol of the journey I had undertaken on multiple levels, reclaiming finances, reclaiming self-respect, and reclaiming joy. It was more than a vacation, it was a statement, a declaration that I would no longer be leveraged or diminished, that my contributions, sacrifices, and rights were recognized first by me, and respected by others only when undeniable. And Sarah's presence was a constant, quiet affirmation that allies exist outside the dynamics of control and manipulation, that support can be found when one steps away from toxic systems. Looking back, I understand the sequence of choices that led to this empowerment. The humiliation on Christmas Eve, the decision to cancel the cruise, the methodical uncovering of fraud, the confrontation on New Year's Eve, all were chapters in a story of reclaiming agency. Each action reinforced the principle that I was not an instrument to be used for the financial or emotional whims of others. The consequences Mason faced, the financial reckoning my parents endured, and the strategic victory I orchestrated were all intertwined. They were not merely outcomes, they were confirmations of the efficacy of preparation, evidence, and calm, deliberate action. As I boarded the plane to Paris, luggage in tow, passport ready, I felt the weight of liberation and the lightness of finally being untethered. This was not an escape. It was a conscious movement toward a life defined by personal choices, integrity, and self-respect. The freedom I had fought for with every meticulous step was now tangible, waiting to be explored. And for the first time in decades, the journey was truly mine. No expectations, no manipulations, just the thrill of living on my terms. It was exhilarating, a mixture of relief, joy, and quiet empowerment. And as the plane took off, the city shrinking below, I allowed myself a small smile, knowing that for the first time in a long time, the future was fully, undeniably mine. So that's the story. Standing up for yourself can feel terrifying, messy, and even lonely, but it can also be the most empowering thing you ever do. I reclaimed my independence, drew boundaries, and finally experienced closure on my terms. Family dynamics are complicated, right? But protecting yourself doesn't make you selfish, it makes you human. If you've ever had to take a stand or watch someone do it, I'd love to hear about it. Drop a comment, and don't forget to like or subscribe if this resonated with you.